Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ventures Podcast. I'm excited about this conversation with Scott Kveton. His company, Jump.co, helps people who have real-world assets get into the NFT game in terms of fractionalization, in terms of communicating with audience, in terms of opening up a marketplace to really help creators and those who own assets communicate with their audience and set up those buy and sell transactions. So in this conversation, we talk a lot about the NFT space, Web3. We even dive into a little bit about ChatGPT and GPT-4 and how the implications of this are going to affect everything. So if you're listening to this episode, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com, and there I'll have more extensive show notes, different links to the things that we talk about today. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcast. You can just search for Ventures and it should show up. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Scott Kveton. All right, Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. We've had just a ton, like the last 50 episodes or so have been on Web3, different components of Web3. I've been pretty heavy in the NFT space in 2021. Then before that, it was 2020 and the summer of DeFi. Before that, it was sort of surviving the winter. And then I invested in a bunch of these ICOs. But in 2022, it's been this interesting, one, just the market, obviously. Two, the amalgamation of trying to figure out what's super valuable. So I'm excited to chat with you. I'm really impressed with what y'all are up to with Jump. But would you mind just kicking us off? Tell us a little bit about how you got into Web3.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, I had a circuitous route to Web3. So I've been in tech for 20 plus years, cut my teeth at Amazon, turn of the century, was really active in a whole bunch of technology, like open source, open authentication stuff, co-founded the OpenID and OAuth foundations, and then quickly realized that, the business side was far more interesting. So built, scaled, and sold a couple different companies, venture-backed companies. One was in the mobile space, one was in the point of sale space. And so we kind of built a team that has worked together through Web 1 and Web 2. And we sort of said, well, there's this Web 3 thing. What do we want to do? It's about a year ago, early 2021, we got together and said, okay, well, let's build up a consultancy. Let's do some basically consulting for early stage Web3 companies, technical co-founder stuff. And so we started doing that. And then around about February of 2022 of this year, really kind of just hit on something that we thought was really interesting, and then found a first customer, which is, always kind of the key there. It's fun to have an idea, but unless you have somebody who wants to pay for it. And really it was around physically backed NFTs. So taking physical assets and mapping them to NFTs, and then creating a layer of services that sit on top of that for lending, fractionalization, insurance, vaulting, you name it. And so that's kind of how we ended up in it. But there's been a couple fits and starts before this. We spun up a mining set of infrastructure back when, it was cheap to mine Ethereum, and the returns were really good. We built a platform called cryptoathletes.com, which was kind of like crypto celebrities, but we got a takedown from the NFL, and it was like NFTs were around, but it was still too early, and the NFL wasn't ready to do deals. So these things are about team technology and timing, and we hit on two of those. And so in any case, we've been dabbling around with Web3 for a while, and this is where we're at with Jump.
That's great. Okay, so you were recently in Miami. A lot going on. But let's see, when we release this recording, that will be a week or two prior. But how was it? How were you involved? How was sort of Jump in the game there?
Yeah, so Art Basel is an interesting art festival that's been going on in Miami for about 20 years, and it's a mix of ridiculously high-end parties and artwork and the stuff that you wouldn't even know that you could bid on it is at this event. And what's happened is, like a lot of sort of Web3 and aping in on things, crypto is really bolted onto the side of this. And specifically in this neighborhood called Wynwood, which is an up and coming neighborhood in Miami. Lots of street art, lots of really, really interesting things happening there. And so there were all these really great Web3 events there. that were just super exciting. And this year alone, I'm a fan of really diving into when I move or build a company, I like to really dive into the scene or the space. So did it with open source and went to all the events way back in the day, and have been doing it with with crypto, ETH Denver, Consensus, NFT NYC, NFT London, bunch of events in Lisbon around Web Summit. And it's, to me, it's that boots on the ground and seeing people in action is so much more important. And it's part of why I believe that actually crypto is going to sustain through this thing, because there's real people who are ridiculously passionate about whatever it is, that DAO that they're working on or the project that they have. And it's not just people who are sitting there trying to speculate and buy NFTs because everything goes up in value, because we know it doesn't. People really want to solve real world problems. So Art Basel was great. I think it was almost like a therapy session for everybody, because it was post Thanksgiving, and everybody could kind of share their horror stories of going home, and people like, hey, are you okay? And like, it's like, no, nothing fundamental has changed about crypto with the FTX boondoggle. The fundamentals are still there. We're just having to clean out the riffraff. That's about it.
Totally. Yeah, all these people saying crypto is dead. I think it's actually it's fascinating how they don't understand. We still have a lot to teach the world, that the underlying infrastructure is exactly designed so we don't have to trust the SBFs and CZs and others of the world. So yeah, no, I agree. Getting IRL is super important. The energy and all these different things, all these different meetings is still quite strong. Okay, so when I hear about NFTs with IRL assets, it's usually people bring up real estate, they bring up different supply chain things, they bring up sneakers, they bring up like articles of clothing or different things that they would like to collateralize. Teach us about this space. Like, how should even the entrepreneurs listening in, or the investors that are trying to wrap their head around different use case, like why NFTs matter? Seems like you're positioned exactly in this space. Teach us about it, and like, how should we?
I think our approach is that there are interesting assets that have whether it's collectibles, it could be fine art, it could be vintage cars. There's a range of these assets that they see boom and bust cycles just like anything else, and there's something about being able to represent that as an NFT that allows you to do more interesting things from a liquidity standpoint, from a lending standpoint, insurance, all these things. And there's all these, tools that are being built that solve for those types of things. So what we've said is, okay, great, let's build the infrastructure for taking that physical asset. Our take on it was, there's a lot of experts in trading cards and fine art and these other places. So we built a white label solution for them, because they have the relationships, the expertise, the knowledge, so they can verify the asset, whether it's vaulted or it's out in the real world. They've verified it. Now we feel very confident about that NFT, and then we can wrap it with all of our services that we have. And where we see this going is, if you fast forward, I'm in, when I do stuff like this, I'm in it for 7 to 10 years at least. And with crypto, if we think about a chain of custody and transactions and things over the course of the next 10 years, well, you start to get some predictability about whether it's the price changes, the ebbs and flows of these things. And if you can spread that across a range of different asset classes and then have a whole bunch of volume behind it, you can really understand those markets, and more importantly, create new forms of liquidity for it could be family offices that come in and say, hey, we want to put $5 million to work across 5 of the 15 assets that you support, and we want to move the slider from conservative to really aggressive, because we believe in these assets. And they can drill down to a range of assets, like sort of brand names, or they can drill down to specific, I want that, rookie card, or that specific, Ford Falcon, that's, something that people, get really, really passionate about. And so we just think that at the end of the day, we're not using necessarily crypto to buy and sell from a currency standpoint. We're using it as a means of understanding who owns what and being able to track provenance. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that we leverage from a crypto perspective to take advantage of new ways you can understand what it means to have that kind of ledger. So that's kind of
It's good.
In a nutshell, as best I can explain it.
So who are the partners so you mentioned the family office. Is it people who have, I'd imagine it's multifaceted, right? So let's say the people who have, let's say $5 million to invest, who are the types of people that just say, yes, come talk to Jump because we can help you think through X? Like talk about the profile there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge right now is anybody who's looking to get into Web3 is very nervous. We obviously all just went through the Thanksgiving of people hugging you and saying, "Hey, are you okay?" Because we're going through the FTX debacle. But really, what people want is they want predictability, not in the price of these things, but in predictability in how it works. And so, unfortunately, in the world of trustless, sort of DeFi, this idea of trust or building a brand around folks trusting you is really, really tough. But I'm convinced when it comes to mapping physical assets to a digital representation of it, there's a leap of trust that has to happen there, that you actually have the physical asset. And so trying to sort of map that, I think, is the tricky bit. And so in our conversations, the only reason we can even get doors to open for us is because we have a track record of doing things in tech and executing and building teams and technologies around this stuff, such that people do trust us. They may be taking a leap on Web3 or crypto, but at least they believe, hey, you've navigated a disruptive technological shift. You're likely to be able to do that again. So that's kind of how we're leaning into it. And the other thing here, when we went through this in mobile, I started a company called Urban Airship back in the day. We did push notifications. And back when that started, I got laughed out of a lot of partner meetings trying to raise money, because at the time, you had Steve Ballmer over at Microsoft calling the iPhone cute. We had investors telling us that the carriers were just going to crush you because SMS reigns supreme. They can turn you off at any moment. But what we had was, we knew that there were customers who wanted our technology. They were ready to pay for it, and they were telling us, hey, we want more of it, and we're willing to pay more. And so I see something very, very similar about to happen here with what's happening with crypto. Again, once we clear out the sort of the bad actors, as it were, I think we'll be in much better shape.
Yeah, that's good. So then, do you also partner? So let's say if I were a big car brand, how would you partner with like a big car brand on that side, or am I not understanding it correctly?
No, on the car side, it's more on the vintage cars.
Yeah.
So folks who hold vintage cars that they've held for a long time, and they might want to, people might want to go in and group buy something. There's also some utility that you can do around that. So if I'm a holder of a specific car or some percentage of a car, I might get different rights to it. In other words, I might get to visit it or drive it more. To me, the utility around these things is going to be what drives a lot of the value. I go back to that example of there's a company in New York that's basically they have a solution for restaurants that allows you to create an NFT drop for a restaurant. So let's say it's a really hot restaurant and it's hard to get tables. Well, the amount of money the restaurant can make is defined by the number of tables, by the time that they're open, how they can turn it over. I mean, that's the max they can make. But if it's a hot restaurant and they have this essentially an NFT that allows you to get access at any time, you can almost maximize that scarcity and monetize it. In other words, okay, great, we have 1,000 of these. Anybody who owns these can come in, and there's 3 tables that are always available for those folks. And then you can sell those on the secondary market, and guess what? The restaurant will see a kickback on that sale. So it becomes essentially a new revenue stream, and there's this interesting bit of utility around it. And again, the provenance component gets really, really interesting there, because the NFT that Jimmy Fallon had might be pretty damn cool versus one from Joe Schmo, as it were. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've recently had some series of conversations about NFT marketplaces in the sense of time and place, right? Even so this is fascinating, right? So you're talking about restaurants and the future reservations of seats and things like that, and different utilities. I've heard the same thing around concerts, right? If you're an artist and you're selling out a bunch of shows or whatever.
If you're Taylor Swift, right? Yeah.
Exactly. They can have that secondary market. Instead of giving all that money to Ticketmaster, it actually could come back to the artist or whatever the artist wants to do with it, right? People like Adele and Taylor Swift and others are notable for doing things that are much more fan centric, which I think is good about our future.
Well, what's really cool about that too is you could potentially, as an artist or an athlete, give away some collectible about you, you give it away and you sell it in a charity auction, and you do it as an NFT, and then you can actually hook a royalty to that. So you actually make money on the backside. In other words, all the money sold from the pre-sale or the original drop goes to the charity, and then any subsequent sales come back to you. Or at least a royalty of it anyways. And so to me, that royalty mechanism is really critical, and it's fraught with some challenges because it wasn't the way the ERC is implemented doesn't force royalties to be paid. And so now we have this whole range of marketplaces that are spinning up that don't actually pay the royalty, which is unfortunate. And I think the royalty is one of the key underpinnings of what's going to make this really successful. But that's a whole other conversation to be had. Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So this is interesting. So if I had a piece of art, or if I had a property, well, let's talk about properties for a second. Like how, instead of sticking something on like an Airbnb, although if I were Airbnb, I'd probably be thinking about my Web3 strategy right now. I don't think I've heard anything from them. But anyway, if I had a piece of real estate or a car, let's take the two things. I had a vintage car or I had a piece of real estate. What are the types of things I could interact with Jump with today or in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, really, the big key for us is being able to actually, create the transaction, create the offering, the drop for folks. People can come in and then purchase portions of it. And then, the tricky part with real estate, and to a lesser extent vehicles, although we've pretty much figured that out. Real estate's tricky because each municipality is slightly different about how you record it. And some of them, on your land use and all those kinds of things it becomes a nightmare, which is one of the reasons we avoided real estate.
Okay.
But I think real estate's a really interesting space for this, especially as we get into the world of it getting very, very difficult for people to own real estate. If I could own a part of some real estate, and then that gets me access to potentially cheaper rentals and things like that, but I still have some equity component that will go up in value, that's actually really, I think, attractive for folks.
Yeah.
So we'll see how those things play out. But ultimately, I think there's going to be this whole range of different assets that will be on the blockchain. And our services will just help enable them to get liquidity out of them and better understand the value of those assets, and really for more folks to be able to participate in what tends to be a very difficult space to participate in. Right, it's hard for people to know. Not everybody can go down to Art Basel and get access and buy a $3 million painting, but if you can go online and get a piece of some artists that you believe in, the odds are that the value will go up, assuming that's an interesting, compelling piece of work. So
yeah. Okay, so it sounds like then if you are someone who has a valuable asset and you're thinking about creatively either fractionalizing that or creating some kind of incentive with people, it's use your white label solution. Go to jump.co, use your white label solution and how flexible is it? Like, can you set up your own, if you have lots of different wild ideas that you want to experiment with your community, can you do that? Or like, what are the functionalities right now?
Yeah, I mean, right now the functionalities are limited in the sense that we've been targeting folks who have existing marketplaces, they have significant inventory, and they're looking for a way to onboard that quickly. And then be able to purchase, a range of different assets at once. And so from as easy as the, primary and secondary sale, the minting of the NFTs, the custodial wallet, because most people that show up or that understand these don't know or care that there is a custodial wallet, but there is one, and we power that. The payments piece is another really tricky bit. Being able to just, taking crypto is one thing, and actually we don't even really support taking crypto. But you can slap down a credit card or ACH or wire money in, and we actually manage that through an FBO. Again, that trust component is really critical there. But all these pieces are non-trivial, and bolting them together and making it work at scale is, very, very difficult for all of these different marketplaces to be able to do. They're experts in what they do. We're experts in what we do. Ultimately, where we'll get is we'll take, as we launch more of these marketplaces, we'll actually roll up their inventory, because again, it's all on the blockchain, and you'll be able to go to jump.co and see a clearinghouse of all these different assets. So you might say, hey, I have $20,000. I want to put it across a range of different things, or, a specific brand across a range of different assets. That's where I think this is all going to end up going. And so, we can do a good chunk of that today, specifically the white label part. But for us, it was, hey, we know customers will pay for that. We know that here's the features they want. They don't necessarily care about the protocols or the details of the technology. They just want it to work and they want it to be predictable. And that takes them trusting us to be able to do that. And, we have to earn that trust every customer we land.
So we'll see if the market has learned from the last couple of cycles to whether or not speculation with the next wave is going to be rampant. It probably will be. Humans are humans, but value creation seems to be it's the name of the game. If you're going to use Web3 technologies, you have to create value. And I love how you're approaching it to be able to utilize that. Where do you see the future, the next 5 years in terms of, let's narrow it maybe to the NFT space. Where do you see future opportunities for value creation with NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the physical asset side of things is really interesting. I think provenance, again, going back to who owned what when, that's ridiculously interesting. I think we'll laugh that so many profile pictures were created and so much money was spent on them. Again, it's a lot like tulips, back in the 16th, 17th century. But again, it's you need these things to kind of prove out the tech and prove out the what's interesting there. I think from a macro picture and with respect to crypto, I think the regulatory piece has to be figured out, and hopefully we don't have something that swings too far with the pendulum, especially based on current things. We need something like Section 230 that won't stifle it, but will really encourage the use of crypto and allow 1,000 companies to flourish here, ideally in the US, because if it doesn't happen here, it's going to happen somewhere else, and that ultimately is very, very bad for the US. I do think that we'll see a lot of these cryptocurrencies will go away as Ethereum and Bitcoin become the juggernauts, and as the technology gets better and the gas prices get lower. I think those are really going to be the ones that boil to the top. We're not going to live in a world of 10,000 tokens. It just doesn't make sense. And at the end of the day, people won't even know or care what the token is. They just know that they're using some verb. I Google this, I Venmo that. I don't care that I'm using Ethereum as the chain and the gas was this much, right?
So I have to ask, because this is all the rage right now. OpenAI released ChatGPT. GPT-4 is on the horizon. Our AI overlords are basically already here. How do you see that? How do you see them interacting? How do you see this AI and this extremely faceted, extremely robust and intelligent chat capability, content creation capability, interacting with NFTs, interacting with Web3? What are you seeing in terms
of that's a tricky one. I mean, I think the generative art is really, really interesting, especially if you can have generative art that's tied to a model that was affected by yourself or the community that you're a member of that wants that. I've got some friends in the security space, and their first thought was because they asked ChatGPT over the weekend, write a phishing email, and so it wrote this really sophisticated phishing email. And then the sort of caveat the person put was, okay, so now imagine this tool with being trained on your personal data to be able to compose specific emails and then learn from its mistakes to be able to better target people with phishing emails. I was like, wow, that went to a dark place really quickly. And from a regulatory standpoint, I would be more nervous about AI than I am about crypto. And I know that may sound ridiculous, but I think there's a lot of interesting things happening with AI, but boy, we are not thinking about the ramifications. And I'm not going to to Skynet yet, but I mean, there's definitely some pretty crazy things that are going to happen there. So anyways, yeah.
All right. So where can people learn more about Jump? Where can people find you online to continue the conversation and engage? Where should we point people?
Yeah, for sure. Jump.co is our website. And it's somebody made fun of me for our awesome boomer domain, which cracked me up. And then I'm just Kveton or at Kveton on Twitter. So it's K V as in Victor, ETON. And that's, I do most of my conversations with folks on Twitter. As much as Twitter is kind of a dumpster fire right now, it's still kind of where the Web3 space, continues its day-to-day dialogue. So yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, Scott, this has been great. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks for taking the time, Will. Appreciate it.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.